the lock that shouldn't fail. If you're drawn to the darkest corners of human behavior, hit subscribe, leave a comment, and stay with me, because once you enter the story, there's no easy way out. The first alarm went off at 2:17 a.m., slicing through the silence of the Colorado Rockies like a blade. Red lights flared along the concrete corridors of ADX Florence, the prison so secure it's nicknamed the Alcatraz of the Rockies. A place built on one promise: nobody escapes, and nothing happens without being seen. Yet something had. In cell block D, a guard named Marcus Hale stood frozen, his breath fogging the reinforced glass. The cell in front of him was supposed to be occupied by one of the most closely monitored inmates in federal custody, a man whose name had been scrubbed from public records and replaced with a number. But the cell was empty. No broken locks. No alarms triggered before that moment. No signs of forced entry. Just an absence where a human being should have been. Within minutes, the prison was sealed. Helicopters swept the mountains with white beams, cutting through pine forests and snow-dusted ridges. Inside, guards moved with practiced urgency, boots echoing against concrete designed to absorb sound. The warden was summoned from his on-site residence. Federal authorities were notified. Phones lit up across multiple agencies with a single, chilling question. How does someone vanish from a prison designed to erase the very concept of escape? ADX Florence was never meant to be part of a mystery. It was meant to be the end of them. The prison sits alone, a fortress carved into isolation, miles from the nearest town. Inmates spend 23 hours a day in single cells made of poured concrete. Meals slide through narrow slots. Recreation happens in outdoor cages that resemble empty swimming pools, open to the sky but sealed from the world. Every movement is tracked. Every sound is accounted for. And yet, standing in cell D-23, investigators found something they couldn't explain. Scratched into the underside of the steel bed frame were 4 words, so faint they were nearly missed. "You never locked me in." By sunrise, Special Agent Daniel Reeve was driving toward the prison, the mountains rising like silent witnesses on either side of the highway. Reeve wasn't easily rattled. He'd spent 15 years chasing organized crime, domestic terrorism, and men who believed systems existed to be beaten. But ADX Florence was different. This wasn't supposed to be beatable. Reeve arrived to a controlled chaos. Officials spoke in hushed tones. Guards avoided eye contact. The warden, a rigid man named Thomas Kincaid, looked like someone trying to hold a cracking dam together with his hands. "The inmate's name?" Reeve asked. Kincaid hesitated, just long enough to be noticed. For now, he's referred to as Elias Vorn. That pause mattered. Vorn, Reeve learned, hadn't always been destined for a place like ADX. Years earlier, he'd been a systems engineer, brilliant, reclusive, obsessed with structural vulnerabilities. He consulted for private security firms, even briefly for federal contractors, until something went wrong. Classified data went missing. A colleague died under suspicious circumstances. Vorn vanished, only to resurface years later under a different name, connected to a string of crimes that never quite stuck in court. Eventually, he was convicted on charges the public barely understood and sent to Florence, buried alive in concrete and routine. "He was quiet," said Hale, the guard who'd found the empty cell. "Too quiet. Followed every rule. Never complained. Never caused trouble." Reeve had heard that before. The most dangerous men often did. They reviewed the footage. Every camera angle. Every hallway. Every door sensor. The system showed Vorn entering his cell after evening check. The door locked. The guard confirmed visual. Nothing unusual. Then, hours later, the alarm triggered, after the cell was already empty. "It's like he stepped out between frames," one technician muttered. Reeve didn't believe in gaps that wide without human hands creating them. As the investigation widened, inconsistencies piled up. Maintenance logs showed unauthorized access requests denied, yet doors had clearly been opened. A guard roster had been altered digitally, placing officers in corridors they swore they never patrolled. Even the prison's internal clock system was off by exactly 90 seconds during the critical window. Someone hadn't just escaped. Someone had rewritten the rules of the building. Reeve requested Vaughan's full file. Not the redacted version. Not the sanitized summary. The real one. It took hours and several tense phone calls before a sealed envelope arrived, stamped with classifications that made even seasoned agents uneasy. Inside were psychological evaluations, intercepted communications, and a series of handwritten notes taken from Vaughan's cell months earlier. Most were dense, technical ramblings about infrastructure and stress points. But one page stood out, underlined twice. Control isn't about walls, Vaughan had written. It's about belief. Convince them the system is perfect, and they'll stop looking for cracks. Reeve felt a cold realization settle in his chest. ADX Florence wasn't just a prison to Vaughan. It was a challenge. Then came the call that changed the tone of the entire case. A civilian contractor, one of the few with limited access to the prison's digital systems, had gone missing. His truck was found abandoned on a dirt road 15 miles away, engine cold, door open. Inside the cab, investigators discovered a folded piece of paper tucked beneath the driver's seat. For words, written in the same precise handwriting. "You never locked me in." But it was what they found next, hidden beneath the prison's oldest wing, behind a sealed maintenance door that hadn't been opened in decades, that made Reeve realize this wasn't an escape at all. It was a message. And it meant Elias Vaughan had planned something far worse than freedom. The architecture of betrayal. By the time the sealed maintenance door was forced open, the mood inside ADX Florence had shifted from panic to dread. The door wasn't supposed to exist on any modern blueprint. It belonged to the original structure, a remnant from an earlier federal facility that once occupied the land. When the prison was rebuilt, the passage had been sealed, documented as inaccessible and forgotten. Forgotten by everyone except Elias Vaughan. The space beyond the door was narrow and suffocating, a concrete artery running beneath the prison's foundation. Dust lay undisturbed except for a single set of footprints leading into the darkness. No drag marks. No signs of a struggle. Whoever walked through here had done so calmly, deliberately. Special Agent Daniel Reeve followed the trail with a growing sense of unease. This wasn't improvisation. It was choreography. At the end of the passage, they found a small service chamber housing fiber optic lines and power relays, critical infrastructure that fed the prison's internal systems. One panel had been opened. Inside, wires were rearranged with surgical precision, rerouting signals just enough to create blind spots without triggering alarms. "He didn't break anything," a technician whispered. "He improved it." That was the moment Reeve understood the truth. Vaughan hadn't escaped from ADX Florence. He'd escaped through it. The investigation expanded outward, but pressure was already mounting from above. Media helicopters circled the mountains. Leaks hit online forums, sparking rumors that the most secure prison in America had been compromised. Officials denied everything, clinging to rehearsed statements about a contained internal incident. But Reeve had seen the file. Elias Vaughan was no ordinary inmate. As federal agents traced Vaughan's past, a pattern emerged, one that reached far beyond prison walls. Before his arrest, Vaughan had consulted quietly for private defense contractors, municipal security firms, even foreign infrastructure projects. He specialized in identifying weaknesses in systems others assumed were flawless. And wherever he worked, strange things followed. Data breaches ruled non-hostile. Accidents blamed on human error. Internal audits quietly buried. Every time, Vaughan was gone before questions started. Back at Florence, the human cost of the escape began to surface. The missing contractor, Jacob Mireles, had no criminal record. He was a systems technician with 2 kids and a spotless employment history. His phone records revealed a short series of encrypted messages exchanged with an unknown contact in the weeks before Vaughan's disappearance. The last message, sent at 1:42 a.m., read simply, "It's done." Reeve didn't believe Mireles was a willing accomplice. The timeline didn't fit. The man had been paid modestly, lived modestly, and showed no signs of sudden wealth or radical beliefs. This wasn't greed. It was leverage. The question was what Vaughan had used. As the manhunt intensified, something else became clear. Vorn wasn't running. He wasn't hiding in the mountains or trying to cross borders. Financial tracking showed no attempts to access money. No forged IDs surfaced. No digital footprint appeared on the dark web or encrypted networks. It was as if he wanted to be invisible. Or worse, he wanted them to look in the wrong direction. Then came the second shock. A senior corrections officer named Linda Carver failed to report for duty. Carver had worked at ADX Florence for 11 years, known for her strict adherence to protocol. Her home was found undisturbed, her car still in the driveway. On her kitchen table lay her badge, placed carefully beside a single sheet of paper. "You trust walls because they don't lie," the note read. People do. For Reeve, the realization hit hard and fast. This wasn't a lone escape. It was a cascading failure, designed to unravel confidence in the very idea of control. Vorn was dismantling something piece by piece, using people as pressure points. Interviews with staff revealed subtle changes in the months leading up to the escape. Schedule adjustments justified by efficiency reviews. Minor software updates approved without question. Contractors fast-tracked through background checks. Nothing dramatic. Nothing suspicious on its own. But together, they formed a blueprint. Vorn had turned the prison inward, weaponizing routine against itself. The breakthrough came from an unexpected place. A junior analyst flagged a discrepancy in archived audio logs from Vorn's cell. Prisoners at ADX are recorded constantly, even during solitary confinement. Most of the recordings were silence, broken only by breathing or the distant hum of ventilation. But on several nights, Vorn could be heard whispering. Not to himself. He was teaching. Reeve listened as fragmented phrases emerged from the static. Instructions. Concepts. References to systems theory, behavioral compliance, and timing windows. Vorn wasn't planning alone. He was recruiting, subtly, patiently. Not inmates, but people on the outside who would never realize they were part of the design until it was too late. One phrase repeated more than any other. Every system leaks. As if on cue, evidence began to disappear. Surveillance backups corrupted. Email chains vanished. A hard drive from the maintenance office was reported missing, then mysteriously reappeared, wiped clean. Someone inside the investigation was slowing them down. Reeve confronted Warden Kincaid, pushing past formalities. The warden's composure finally cracked. "There are things about this prison you don't know," Kincaid admitted. "Things that were never meant to be tested." That admission raised a darker possibility. ADX Florence wasn't just compromised. It was built on compromises. Late that night, as agents prepared to brief federal leadership, an emergency alert came through. A body had been found in an industrial facility outside Pueblo, Colorado. Male. Early 40s. Identified as Jacob Mireles. There were no signs of a struggle. No theft. Just a message etched into a nearby concrete wall. "You can't cage an idea." As Reeve stared at the crime scene photos, his phone vibrated with a new message from an untraceable number. One sentence. "You're finally looking where I wanted." And somewhere, Elias Vorn was still free, watching the system turn on itself, exactly as he designed. The prison without walls. The message wasn't a taunt. That's what unsettled Daniel Reeve the most. "You're finally looking where I wanted." It wasn't rushed, angry, or triumphant. It read like a statement of fact. Elias Vorn didn't need to threaten anyone anymore. He had already proven his point. ADX Florence, the most secure prison on Earth, had failed, not because of force, but because of faith. Reeve stood in the temporary command center as analysts chased ghosts across screens. Phone pings went nowhere. Financial tracking stayed cold. No travel record surfaced. Vorn had become a rumor wearing a name. Then Reeve noticed something that didn't belong. A digital schematic rotated slowly on a monitor, an abstract map of nodes and pathways analysts had built to visualize Vorn's movements and influence. Reeve leaned closer. The nodes weren't random. They formed a circle. Not a prison. A network. Vorn hadn't escaped to disappear. He'd escaped to demonstrate something. The prison was the opening act. The real target was trust. Federal leadership demanded answers. How could a man in near-total isolation manipulate contractors, corrections officers, and digital systems without triggering alarms? The uncomfortable truth was simple.
Vaughan didn't break people. He studied them.
He found the exact pressure point where routine became vulnerability. Linda Carver's disappearance became the final piece of the puzzle. Her financials were clean. Her communications normal. But her psychological profile revealed something else: burnout. Years of working inside a place designed to erase humanity had hollowed her out. Vaughan had noticed. In recorded whispers, he spoke about fatigue in guardians, about how the longer someone enforces control, the more they crave relief from it. Carver hadn't betrayed the prison for money. She'd betrayed it for rest. Her body was found 2 days later, miles from the facility, inside her car. No signs of violence. No note. Just exhaustion, documented in the most final way possible. The case was ruled a death by medical complications, but Reeve knew better. Vaughan hadn't killed her. He'd designed a situation where she destroyed herself. That distinction mattered. As public pressure mounted, a closed-door briefing revealed a classified truth that reframed everything. ADX Florence wasn't just a prison. It was a prototype. Its systems, behavioral controls, and isolation protocols had been quietly replicated across federal and private facilities worldwide. Vaughan had helped design parts of it long before his arrest. Florence wasn't the end of the system. It was the blueprint. Reeve finally understood the message etched beneath the bed frame. "You never locked me in." They had locked him out. 3 weeks after the escape, a controlled press conference announced that Elias Vaughan was presumed dead. An unnamed source suggested he'd perished during the escape, his body unrecovered in the mountains. The story was thin, but it was enough. Markets stabilized. Media attention shifted. The world moved on. Reeve didn't. Late one night, a package arrived at his apartment with no return address. Inside was a single tablet device, wiped clean except for one video file. Reeve pressed play. Vaughan appeared on screen, seated in a plain room, his face calm, almost gentle. No masks. No distortions. "They needed you to believe I escaped," Vaughan said. "Escapes are familiar. Comforting. They suggest an end point." He leaned closer. This was never about leaving a prison. It was about proving one exists everywhere. The video cut to footage, brief, clinical glimpses of facilities across the world. Secure buildings. Data centers, detention blocks, all running variations of the same systems. "You build walls," Vaughan continued, "and then you stop questioning the people who guard them. That's where control fails." The final seconds showed something that made Reeve's blood run cold. A live feed, a secure operations room, familiar faces, familiar protocols, his own task force. The video ended. Within minutes, alarms blared across the command center downtown.
Systems went offline.
Doors locked out of sequence. Digital access fractured. Not a breach, an exposure. Everything still functioned, but no one could be certain who controlled what. It took 12 hours to restore order. By morning, the official statement blamed a software anomaly. No suspects. No threat.
Case closed.
Reeve resigned 2 days later. 6 months passed. Then, in a small European city, a private detention facility reported a failure. No escape. No deaths. Just a message discovered during a routine audit, etched behind a server rack. Every system leaks. Authorities dismissed it as a hoax. 3 months after that, a financial institution in the U.S. experienced a cascading security malfunction. Again, no theft. No damage. Just confusion. A confidence shaken. The patterns were subtle, almost polite, and always there was the same mistake. They kept looking for Elias Vaughan. They never looked for what he'd turned into, because the truth was far more unsettling than a man on the run. ADX Florence still stands, silent in the mountains, its cells locked, its routines intact. The world still believes in escape-proof prisons, in perfect systems, in walls that don't lie. But somewhere, inside the infrastructure everyone trusts without question, Something is quietly watching,
Learning.
waiting. And if this story unsettled you, remember, this wasn't about a prison at all. It was about what happens when the idea of control escapes confinement. And it already has.